Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Political Power Ranker, where we track the movers, shakers, and rule makers that govern what we do from state government to federal government. I am in the lovely studios in Las Vegas, 8 News Now, KLAS TV. Joining me is one of the giants of the political scene in Nevada, John Langler.
In
John,
height and knowledge.
in height and knowledge, and you know what? And we're going to bring in another giant, and that is Spencer Kimball, director of polling at Emerson College. Spencer, good to see you again this week.
Chris, always good to see you and John.
It's awesome. So, while we're in Nevada, we figured let's do a Nevada poll. And we've got some really interesting results. So, let's go to see some of those numbers here in Nevada. Spencer, what do we have? And why do we decide? What do we do in Nevada as far as polling is concerned?
Well, certainly Nevada is maybe one of the first in the nation as we start looking at the 28 race. But we also have a really competitive gubernatorial election here with a Republican incumbent running for re-election. So we decided to take a look at Nevada this week, and we collected the data using text messages and online. And as you can see here, we do have that competitive race between the Republican and Democrat. The incumbent, Joe Lombardo, is at 41. His potential Democratic opponent, Aaron Ford, the Attorney General, is at also 41. So you look at that on the top line, and it looks very competitive. As we dig into those numbers a little bit, Chris, we start looking at those independents. And that's the swing vote because Democrats are already lined up for Ford, and the Republicans are already lined up for Lombardo. It's like 93-5 on both sides. So the independents are the key swing vote, and that was the key swing vote back in 22. And Lombardo won it by 5 points. You can see here that he's up 8 points right now with those independents, but the independents are the ones that are undecided. So that's going to be the swing vote as we look at this election over the next year or so.
So let's go back to that first slide real quick, and let's just talk about it being a 41-41 race in this poll. Should it be that close with an incumbent who's had a pretty decent run over the past couple of years? And it's a purple state, no doubt, but it looks like a fairly even race with a guy who is not widely known across the country, and obviously better known here in Nevada. But should it be that close?
Well, being a year out from the election, this is when generally voters are not tuned into the race. So they're looking at it. And what we're trying to gauge at this point is this going to be competitive, or is one of the candidates kind of disqualified? And what we see here is that neither candidate is disqualified. And coming out of the box, it looks to be competitive, which is surprising because Lombardo, he's been very popular that we've been tracking over the last couple of years. It seems to have waned lately, and it'll be interesting to see what John knows from what's on the ground about why that popularity might be dropping.
John Langler, host of a political show here at KLAS TV, 8 News Now. What do you think about Spencer?
Yeah, so we've been following, obviously, this race for some time now. It had been widely rumored that Aaron Ford, the Attorney General, was going to run as a Democrat against Joe Lombardo, the incumbent. Lombardo's popularity, I think one of the reasons that maybe even though he's well known, obviously, in the state, his popularity has flatlined a little bit more is a lot of critics say he hasn't actually done that much. He's, in terms of what's been going on, we had our legislative session, we had a special session recently. He's been out there, but there have been some little hiccups in state government. We had a big cyber attack on state government recently, and there were criticisms of where he was when it was going on, and in the initial response that's been straightened out since then. As Spencer mentioned, we're still some ways out from the next election, so it's going to be up to not only Governor Lombardo to establish what he has done in his first 4 years, but also Attorney General Ford trying to get more brand recognition. You look at the independence numbers, it's worth pointing out that nonpartisan voters is the biggest block in Nevada right now. So that certainly speaks to the numbers and why that independence number is so big. That's where the real voter is in Nevada, independents, trying to get those nonpartisan voters on their side. And Mr. Ford has a long way to go to at least get some more brand recognition.
For context, what John's saying, independent or nonpartisan voters registration is at 37% in Nevada. Republican and Democrat registration are both exactly at 28%. So seeing that independent voter and winning that is really the linchpin in victory for anyone.
And that, they call, as Spencer was saying, Nevada a purple state for a reason. And that's why the number of registered voters in both parties has dropped since for the last several elections. That number of independent, nonpartisan voters has grown. It's the biggest voting bloc, and that's where the focus is always for candidates in the state.
Kind of a Western spirit kind of feel.
Nevada's always had that sort of independent vibe to it, sort of a libertarian almost for some of the candidates, especially more so years and years and years ago. Now, as more people have moved into the state, some of that has softened slightly, but that's certainly the mindset for a lot of the voters here.
And we're going to dig deeper into this as we go through this survey a little bit more, but just put into context the Trump-Lombardo relationship, because, as Donald Trump has his ups and downs nationally, how does that impact Lombardo, and what does Lombardo feel about Donald Trump, and what's their relationship been?
So President Trump was very popular. Obviously, he won Nevada in the last election. He came here. In fact, he made his no taxes on tips proposal here in Nevada during his campaign. When Lombardo was running for governor, it was sort of a soft embrace of the Trump name and President Trump's brand. He didn't shy away from him, but it wasn't a full-on, for lack of a better word, MAGA embrace. And he has the endorsement of Donald Trump. So I think it's an interesting relationship where he embraces Trump to some extent, but not enough so that it's a full-fledged, it's not completely in his office, in his campaign, in his DNA. There have been some times where Lombardo has slightly differed from the Trump administration. And I think especially right now in Nevada, with the way the economy is, the effect of some of the tariffs, the shutdown, and other economic issues on Nevada, the Trump policies have not been very successful for the bread and butter of Nevada, which is the resort industry. Their numbers have been down for months since the summer. And so that as you're a governor of the state of Nevada, you need to acknowledge that. You can't simply just lean into what's been happening in Washington, D.C., because it hasn't really been great for Las Vegas, Reno, and the rest of the state.
The economy has slowed down dramatically, and we're seeing that just in our own business here at KLAS. All right, Spencer, we've got more numbers, favorability numbers. Let's go to that slide and let's talk a little bit more about what you're seeing.
Well, to John's point, Governor Lombardo is fairly well known here in the state. As we take a look at that name recognition slide here, 20% are unsure of the governor. But if we look at the attorney general, it's 41%. So twice as many voters are unsure about that candidacy. It's similar to what we saw last week in Arizona, where incumbent Governor Katie Hobbs is popular, but the Republican challenger, Andy Biggs, is fairly unknown as well. So both of these challengers are going to try to define themselves while the incumbents are trying to define them. So it should be a very fascinating race over the next 8-9 months as these campaigns start communicating with voters and voters start tuning into the election.
As a political consultant can look at this and go, man, 41% of people really are unsure or never heard of Attorney General Ford. That's an opening for me to exploit to define him if I'm Governor Lombardo.
Exactly. And on the flip side, it's also an opportunity for him to define himself. But if I'm Governor Lombardo, I'm going to come out aggressively here to try to define his opponent before his opponent defines himself and becomes more popular amongst the electorate.
What do you think, John, when it comes to the definition of each candidate and the money they have to do it?
Well, obviously everybody knows who Governor Joe Lombardo is. He was the sheriff here in Las Vegas, Clark County, before he became governor. Aaron Ford, he was in the state legislature before becoming the attorney general. One way he's tried to get his name out there since his time as AG has been with a lot of lawsuits. He's been involved in a lot of litigation against the Trump administration and a couple of indications in a couple of situations, the Biden administration as well. That's one of the ways he's tried to get his name out, busting scams, taking on big pharma, things along those lines. So he's been involved in that litigation to try and get his name out there. We just finished a special legislative session up in Carson City last night. Mr. Ford used his opportunity to testify in front of one of the committees to essentially give a campaign speech and chastise Governor Lombardo for his policies, or in his words, lack thereof. So he is starting the process of getting that name recognition. But you're talking about the fundraising. Last numbers with the state, Governor Lombardo has about $5.5 million in his bank account. Aaron Ford, the Attorney General, has, I think it's about $2 million. So he has a ways to go to fundraise. And remember, Aaron Ford has a primary component as well, Alexis Hill, who's on the Washoe County Commission up in Reno. So he has a battle first before he even necessarily gets to the general election.
Where he's going to have to spend money to ensure his nomination.
Absolutely.
Let's move to the next slide, which is an approve or and disapprove slide. Spencer, what do you have here?
Well, so let's take a look at our federal officers. You got President Trump. He's underwater in the state. But then look at our two senators here, Cortez Masto and Jackie Rosen, both underwater by big numbers. And this has a lot to do with the latest government shutdown, I think, because when we look inside those numbers, the Democrats are struggling with Democrats. So they've lost their base of support, those two incumbent senators. Now, neither are up for re-election in 26, but there's a potential primary coming down the pike in 28 for Rosen.
With those senators' numbers being as they are, does that bleed over into the primary on the Democratic side for governor? Is there any correlation there or causation?
Well, it'll be interesting to see in the Democratic primary if they're able to connect some of these candidates together and say it's just more of the same. On the flip side, we'll see over the course of the campaign if Ford can define himself differently, at the state level than at the federal level. So these two different offices do attract a different type of vote, where sometimes voters are willing to vote Republican, Democrat at the state level, but not at the federal. We'll see here if they're able to make that switch. But obviously, it's bad news for the Democrats to see their two sitting senators with low approval.
Just one quick question about this as well. The Trump approval, and I'm not looking at disapproval. The Trump approval is 5 points higher than Joe Lombardo. Should I read into anything in that, or should I just look at the comparison between approval, disapproval?
Well, I would look at the whole picture. So yes, Trump does have a very strong base. So if I'm Lombardo, to John's point, you need the Trump vote. But look at his disapproval, where it said over 50. You can't have that as well. So he's got to be able to thread the needle by having the Trump support, but not alienating the people that are anti-Trump to come out against him, not because of policy, just because he's with Trump. So that's going to be an interesting needle to thread for the governor.
What do these numbers tell you, John?
I was going to say that's how Governor Lombardo won, was by threading that needle with regards to President Trump and trying to get independence on his side when he ran for governor almost 4 years ago. What's interesting about the numbers, you mentioned Senator Rosen and Senator Cortez Masto, the two Democrats. They split on the government shutdown up until the very end. Senator Rosen voted in favor of the government shutdown up until obviously all the Democrats, or 8 Democrats, switched. Senator Cortez Masto voted with Republicans to reopen the government, citing the effects on the economy. So they took different paths until ultimately they both decided to vote to end the government shutdown. You mentioned, though, they're not up for re-election for a while, so that they have a little bit of leeway. Should point out the Democratic Congress members, there are 3 of them here in Nevada, all in Southern Nevada. They all voted in favor of the shutdown. They voted against the measure when it was in the House as well. Susie Lee, Dina Titus, and Stephen Horsford. So they're obviously up for election again as well. So they stuck with trying to continue the government shutdown, fight for healthcare, all the things that Democrats were pushing for. They stuck with it. And I think that's an important distinction between 2 senators, Democrats who are not running for re-election, and 3 members of Congress who are.
And real quick, we have one last slide, and Spence, I need you to keep with this in like 30 seconds. It's Lombardo approve, disapprove year over year. Can we look at that real quick and quick commentary?
I'll give you a quick one because I need John's insight. Look, last year Lombardo was plus 17. Now he's minus 2. What has happened over the last year that has caused his approval to drop? And I'm going to throw that back to John for a quick answer.
You look at the economy, I think that's one thing. The effect of the federal government tariffs from the Trump administration on the resorts. You also look at that cyber attack on state government. That crippled the state government websites for months. That was a big issue for the state. They've fixed it, but that is an indication and maybe an indictment on the Lombardo administration.
Got it. All right, much more to come. We are in Nevada, talking Nevada politics with John Langler and, of course, Spencer Kimball, Emerson College Polling. Much more to come. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Political Power Ranker with John Langler here in Nevada, KLAS, Las Vegas, and Spencer's over in Boston, Emerson College Polling Director. We're looking at Nevada polls. Next up, the next slide is about what's important out here in Nevada. Spencer?
Yeah, so we look at this question, we've asked it in different states, and we see some movement generally on the immigration issue, but also on abortion. And not, no different here. Abortion, which was voted on and put into the Constitution back in the last election, isn't really front of mind for voters, and that's what we've seen around the country. What's different out here is the economy and cost of living. That hasn't changed. And so when I look at Governor Lombardo's favorability and approval numbers dropping, my question is, has the issues kind of just stayed the same and they're not being solved, and now voters might be getting a little frustrated with those policies? But that's what the issues seem to be on the top line.
John?
Well, a lot of that issue of affordability, housing affordability, economic, that comes from Washington, D.C. more so than it comes from Carson City. The governor's kind of saddled with that. But the economy it's a major issue, obviously, everywhere, but especially here in Nevada, we've noticed because of the effect of tariffs, a lot of international tourism went down, especially over the summer, which traditionally is softer.
And you lost a lot of Canadians, too.
A lot of Canadian visitation went down. A lot of Asian visitation went down. Again, summer is usually softer, but the bounce back hasn't been as positive for resorts. Gaming numbers have been a bit down as well on the Las Vegas Strip. So you add all that together, we're a gaming town, we're a resort town, and that's been the effect on the economy. At the same time, housing prices have kind of flatlined recently, but they have been going up steadily for a long time. Those are ongoing issues here. It's become more expensive to live in Nevada. It's not the bargain that it used to be. So that's why that's such a big issue for voters in Nevada, is something with the economy. What can be done about it, even though a lot of it really would have to come from D.C.
Now, this is a big time of year for the city of Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, this is F1 week.
Formula One week.
F1 week, big race this weekend.
Mm-hmm. And usually this is a dry time for Las Vegas. Usually the time around the holidays used to be very quiet. Formula One has changed that. It's a big week here in Las Vegas. After the holiday season, that's when conventions really pick up. CES, our biggest one, is in the beginning of the year. And the convention visitation had been going down even last year as well. And it's all connected to the economy. If businesses are struggling, they're not going to spend money to send folks to conventions here in Las Vegas. So it's a real challenge for Las Vegas. And Nevada's tried so hard to diversify with not the most success. There's gaming and there's mining and there's not a whole lot else. And that's been a challenge.
Well, anecdotally, I mean, I've been here for a couple of days now, and I haven't seen the crowds this year like I've seen past years over F1 week.
Now, this is more than politics. This is more of sort of like an economic discussion, perhaps. There are still a lot of people visiting Las Vegas and still a lot of money being spent here. But even the casinos will tell you that it's been softer. The tourism officials will tell you it's been softer. And so that manifests itself when it comes down to election time, when the voter is like, what have you done for me lately? What's the answer going to be? We'll find.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We get National Finals Rodeo here in 2 weeks as well. So that's another big time frame for the economy out here. All right, next slide. We're going to move over to a little bit of Donald Trump and his handling of issues. Spencer?
So if we look at Nevada and Arizona, Trump's handling of the economy is underwater. But what's interesting I found was the immigration issue. In Arizona, they're pretty split, but in Nevada, they're underwater again. They don't really like the Trump immigration policy as much as they do next door in Arizona. Any thoughts on immigration in the state?
Well, I think one thing to note about immigration, obviously Arizona's right on the border, Nevada's not. We have, just like Arizona, a large immigrant population here, and a lot of that ties into the resort industry. A lot of immigrants work on the Strip, and they've been working on the Strip for a long time in the resorts, just construction industry, the whole thing. Nevada has not seen as many of those ICE raids, that activity that we've seen in other parts of the country. So it hasn't been as front foot as maybe in other parts of the country, in Arizona perhaps. So maybe that's why it's underwater, is there's a lot of immigrants that live here that are seeing what's been going on elsewhere. they don't love what the Trump administration is doing, and that might be where that polling number comes from.
It's interesting. Nevada and Arizona may be close, but they're kind of two different states. I mean, they just look at things differently.
It's a very different mindset, Arizona to Nevada. I go to Arizona from time to time. As you mentioned, it's right across the river, but most of when you think of Nevada, it's Las Vegas and everything else. There's Reno, of course, but most of the voter base is, of course, in Las Vegas. Same in Arizona. Most of the voter base is in Phoenix. Phoenix is 3-4 hours away from here, and it's a very different mindset when it comes to economy, politics, just views on life. It's just a little bit different.
All right, let's move on to another slide. We got a lot of stuff to get to. We've got the Democratic presidential primary hypothetical, Spencer.
Well,
Bunch of names.
we have Iowa, you have New Hampshire, you have South Carolina, and you have Nevada. Nevada could be one of the first states in the country to go off and help select the nomination for both parties. And when we take a look at this, Gavin Newsom, who used Prop 50 out in California to really boost him up nationally, is still up here in Nevada. Pete Buttigieg, former transportation secretary, is still well known. I think probably the surprise on the chart is the former Vice President Harris, down at 6%, struggling to stay relevant within the Democratic primary.
That's the first time we've seen her in any one of your states kind of fall that far down the list of potential presidential candidates. John, any thoughts on that and her standing here in Nevada?
Well, obviously, the former vice president and Governor Newsom are from California, so they're right next door to us. Governor Newsom's been in the news more often. Obviously, you mentioned the proposition recently. He was in Nevada, right on the California border during the Biden administration for talking about a high-speed rail line. So he was pretty out front on that.
But you've had a lot of Californians move here because of the California economy.
That's very true, and which is interesting. But at least in terms of name recognition, he certainly would have more attention. The former vice president, she came here quite a bit during her presidential run, her brief presidential run. Hasn't been here since, as I can recall. So that might be why she doesn't register very highly on the poll.
Got it. Let's a couple more slides real quick before we have to wrap up this segment. Go to Republicans. No shock here. Of the big ones, JD's still way out ahead.
Exactly. He's at this point cleared the field as the heir apparent for Trump. Now, obviously, we're way to go to that nominating contest, but he is the early favorite, and we see it nationally, and now we're starting to see it in the state polling.
And the last slide you have, Spencer, is one about no tax on tips. Big service economy out here in Las Vegas. Donald Trump announced his no tax on tip policy out here. Said it was a person, an attendant who was working with him, serving him food, is one who brought that idea up to him. Let's see that number, because it kind of surprised me a little bit that it was that low.
Well, you got 40% that think it's going to be positive impact, and about 12% that think it's going to have a negative impact. About half of the voters don't think it'll have any impact. But what's interesting, it's really driven by partisanship. So Democrats are split like 19-18 that it's going to have a positive negative. Republicans think it's going to have a huge positive impact. But the good news, I guess, for the Republicans is that the independents think it's going to have a positive impact, about 2-1. So it might be a campaign issue that you'll start hearing about on the trail as the campaigns heat up.
And no one's filed their taxes yet. So that may have an impact come next spring, which the Republicans, they'll look at it and they would really want that impact to happen next spring as they try to dig out of what could be a 15-point discrepancy from a Republican Democratic polling standpoint across the country, according to some polls. John, quick reaction on that slide.
Again, that started here in Las Vegas. I think, as you mentioned, some people are still waiting maybe to file their taxes to see what the impact is going to be. It was interesting locally. The Culinary Union was first against no taxes on tips. The Democrats proposed their own version. Then they were in favor of it. But I think there's still some skepticism over its impact, if it'll actually work, if it's worthwhile. And until that really kicks in, a holding pattern, I think, right now.
Got it. We are racing through this show. We have to take another quick break, and we'll be right back with our favorite part, who's up and who's down this week. So we'll be right back. All right, we are back. Spencer, let's talk about who's up and who's down this week. Let's go with who's up first. Who do you have?
Well, we're looking at 2028, and on the upside is Gavin Newsom, governor of California, and also on the upside, Vice President J.D. Vance, both leading their party nominations.
Clash of Titans seems to continue to be built over all our statewide polling, with those two kind of just leading the charge. All right, now let's go to the wah-wah. Who's down?
Well, down right now are the two U.S. senators coming out of Nevada. We have Cortez Masto and Jackie Rosen, both underwater. We'll see if they can build back their party's base. That's where they've lost their support, and we'll track them over the next couple of years as they stay in the Senate.
John, quick thoughts?
Government shutdown. That's the effect right there.
There you go. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. This is Chris, John, and Spencer from Nevada, Las Vegas. We will see you next week on Political Power Ranker.